So today we're going to go over how to write a case. It's going to be very simple and very brief. I'm going to upload the cases to Google Drive so that you guys can understand and follow along with me as I'm talking. So the affirmative starts with a modern democracy, an informed and active electorate is not a part but a vital tenet. So you start with your framework. Your framework is basically saying to the judge, this is what we must value in the realm. This is what is vitally important. This is what you must judge and vote on. So you're basically just giving your voting issues. Then when you're moving from your voting issues, you go into important definitions to uphold your framework. After you do that, you go into, your value or criterion, what's important, and why those link to your framework, why those are the most important things in this round. All this is cited with things called cards. Now, cards are just a fancy word for evidence, and they're citations. I'm also going to give you a password to get to a brief, and so the brief is going to have tons, and I mean tons, of evidence for the affirmative and the negative. More affirmative than negative because it's a release in progress right now, but you could do independent research on your negative and still get some great sources. And so after that, you go into your contentions. And so your contentions are basically saying, okay, this is what's important. This is why it's important. I dropped the front part of my case. Your contentions are just your basic arguments. Why, and you have to make sure to link why they're important to your framework and your value criterion, because everything should support everything else within a good case. Make sure you have evidence and cards for all of your contentions. If your contentions are broad, make sure to have subpoints, like subpoint A or subpoint B. Contention 2 of the affirmative is a good example of a contention that's broad that needs subpoints. You can format however you want. The way that I formatted my cases just makes it easier for me to find out where my value criterion, framework, and contentions rest. Then you have blocks. So blocks are defenses against very common arguments that you're expecting. So since I'm expecting arguments about national security, I have blocks for that with disclosure to the government if confidential is not a revelation, as it still protects confidential identities. And then I have evidence for that. And my evidence for that isn't in the brief, but I researched that myself. What's also important is that if you look at the third contention of the affirmative case, you'll see that it kind of drags on, and even though it doesn't say it has subpoints, that's kind of a critical argument. We'll go over what exactly that is later, but the point is that it's one thing linking directly to another and saying that this is something that's not necessarily inherent to the resolution or argument we're having, but something that is very tangentially related and is something we can't ignore. You want to have defenses for all the arguments you're making in your blocks because you don't want to be caught off guard. Now let's move on to the negative case. So the negative, everything's the same as the affirmative. The only thing is my negative is shorter, and your negative should also be shorter because, you're going to have 7 minutes to attack and defend. But if you're going to have a short negative, like mine is actually uncharacteristically short. But since I have a short negative, what I do is rail the affirmative. I have a bunch of blocks, not all of them that are going to be on the case I release to you guys, about how to just block anything the opponent gives to me and attack everything I can. Because if they're spending so much time defending, they can't spend as much time attacking my case. So it's called railing. You guys can do that if you want to. You don't have to. So that's basically all I have for you guys about how to case write. Make sure you're formulating your arguments well. I understand that this seems really hard, but just think of it like you're writing an argument essay for English. Write your contention, write the argument, get the evidence. And if you guys can just have contentions, evidence, and have arguments to go with it, by Tuesday, I can definitely help you guys write your frameworks and your value criteria. In fact, I plan to. So I want you guys to have as much of your cases done as possible by Tuesday. By Tuesday, I want to see everyone's cases that is competing at Bel Air and or at Houston Memorial. That way I can get to start editing you guys' cases. I'll send out a reminder in a minute about how to access the brief. And if you have any questions, I will send out my number with that so that you can text me. Have a great weekend and happy case writing.